Welcome to the Better with Age podcast. I am Leah Wetzel, licensed nutritionist, and it's an honor for me today to interview Alden Wicker. Alden is an investigative journalist and the author of the book called To Die For: How Toxic Fashion is Making Us Sick and How We Can Fight Back, which this book won the Society for Environmental Journalists Rachel Carlson Book Awards. She also writes about healthy fashion and homes for her platform EcoCult, which is now on Substack, and contributes to publications such as the New York Times, BBC, Wired, Vox, Vogue, and more. She made expert appearances on NPR's Fresh Air, the BBC, and NBC to speak on consumer sustainability and health. And she splits her time between Brooklyn and southern Vermont, where she's currently renovating and greening up her old farmhouse. I hope you enjoy. Well, hello. Hey,
Hi.
Alden. Sorry that the lights went out as I'm starting the recording. It's great to have you on the podcast today. I really appreciate your time coming on the show, and I really value all the work that you're doing. The books, the book that you created, the book To Die For, is awesome. I was sharing off camera that I've been sharing it a lot with people, and they're sharing it with people. I feel like in my networks of friends, it's becoming a new understanding, but a really important focus and shift when it comes to textiles.
Thank you so much.
Yes, definitely. I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm so honored to have you on today. And I really want to share with our listeners more about you and your work, and really curious about, like, how did you get started as an investigative journalist?
Yeah, that's a good question. Specifically, investigative journalism. I mean, I've been writing about fashion sustainability for a long time, probably 14 years at this point.
Yeah.
And it's a really rich field to get into. A lot of people dismiss it as sort of silly, but it really touches our lives in so many different ways, in terms of economic development and gender relations and chemistry, obviously, but
Yeah.
also, business and labor rights and, craftsmanship, heritage, culture, all of these different things. And so I guess I became an investigative journalist because I was asking questions that were getting harder and harder to answer in a simple way.
Right.
And I was also investigating a few other things that have to do with sustainability. It wasn't just fashion. There's a lot of green claims going around, and often for a while they were sort of passed on as if they were true. And so I started looking into things like the company TerraCycle, who says you can send in anything you want and they'll recycle it. And there's a lot of evidence that that's not true for many
Right.
reasons. I've looked into fashion's effects on, climate and water and people. And so this book, To Die For, it came about because there was finally evidence that fashion could be toxic. I did not know that fashion could be toxic. Most people didn't know that fashion could be toxic, even people working in the fashion sustainability realm.
Yeah.
And a radio program actually called me up. They said, "Hey, can you come on our program because we're covering this lawsuit from Delta flight attendants against Lands' End who made their uniforms because they said they were making them really sick." And when this came up, I was just like, okay, I've never heard about this before, but if what is actually happening, what they say is happening is happening. And as I got into it, it was really horrendous reactions, right? Like rashes, skin burns, swollen eyes, coughs. Some of them would just become disabled just being around the uniforms, losing all their hair, all this stuff.
Right.
If this is actually happening, I need to figure out what is happening because it seemed like there was a conspiracy of silence around this. And I was really curious about it. And also, so I did do a sh very short article for a fashion magazine that was just like, hey, did you know clothing could be toxic? And it was just like listing a few different little pieces of evidence here and there. But I also interviewed a flight attendant and I realized that this was a much larger issue that deserved a lot more care and attention
Yeah.
than I could give it in a fashion magazine article. And so that's what led to me writing this entire book.
Yeah, great. And if you think about that profession and what clothes they're wearing, like they're in it for hours on end, sometimes days on end.
Yeah.
And you, as you highlighted that in the book too, about like kind of like the canary in the coal mine, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah,
that's,
absolutely. I
hmm
mean, it's the flight attendants, like you can't ignore what was happening to the flight attendants because they would get their uniforms at the same time, right? They would roll them out on a certain day. They talk to each other. They wear the same thing all the time. And they compare notes and they can say like, "Oh, your period is getting spotty and weird, like my hair is falling out."
yeah.
And so once they started talking to each other, and then there was a Harvard study affirming that the flight attendants from Alaska Airlines who had the same issue with new uniforms, it affirmed that what was happening was really real.
Mm.
So you just couldn't ignore it. You and I, if we have certain toxic fashion pieces in our wardrobe, we probably wouldn't be able to make that connection because we wear so many different things every other day.
Right.
Sometimes these reactions can take, especially skin reactions, can take like a few days to show up.
So you wear the item and then a few days later it would maybe you'd react to it and not
Yeah.
necessarily wearing that same item at that time, correct?
Right, exactly.
Yes.
And
Hmm
it has become so normalized to
hmm
wear clothing that is synthetic or has these performance finishes on it or these dyes, super cheap clothing, it could be contaminated, that, a lot of doctors don't even know that this is something to ask about. And so it's sort of like it's sort of like food in a lot of ways where you might not realize. Somebody was telling me this story the other day about how she realized that she was lactose intolerant.
Mm.
She thought she was just stressed about going to school because every morning on the way to school, she would get really sick.
Oh yeah.
And then she realized it was because she was having like cereal and milk in the morning, or, excuse me,
That's okay.
or she was having, um, or yogurt, or just all the other things. And so I think it's the same thing with clothing, where
Yeah.
people are having a reaction to clothing, and it could be a skin issue. It could be that they feel extremely tired. It could be brain fog. It could be a host of other things because fashion can contain thousands of different chemicals.
Right.
Um, it could be heavy metals, all these different things. Um, and they just don't think to connect it to what they're wearing. So they could try everything else. And this is a really, really common reaction, especially in terms of or story or journey, especially with moms or people where they're like, I went to my doctor, I tried everything. I cut
Yeah.
out sugar, I cut out dairy, I, switched all my stuff to unscented, and the clothing just doesn't come up.
Exactly. Yeah, it was really in my field of work as a nutritionist, these are the things people are coming to me, we're trying all of these things. And reading your book, I thought of like three or four patients right on top of my head of like, never ask the question, what do you wear on your body? As our skin is our biggest absorbent organ, like, how could that not potentially be an impact in this sort of way? And yeah, like you talked about with food, our branches of our immune system react differently, right? And so
Yeah.
when I'm working with somebody through an elimination protocol, as I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, with the IgG branch per se, the sensitivity branch, like you could eat it and then 3 days later, so you eat your cereal, 3 days
Yeah.
later, you have a reaction from the cereal you ate 3 days ago. How do you connect those things?
Right, right.
So this kind of that same philosophy, but with clothing and textile. It's
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
it
Tell
makes
people
sense.
if they suspect that they are having a reaction to their clothing, they should try a textile elimination diet. Like just wear, you know, undyed, super hippie cotton and linen clothing for a while and see what happens, and you can add things back in. You can add merino wool back in.
Hmm.
You could try wearing a polyester sports bra. You could see what happens and give it 3 days and see if something shows up. I mean, another thing is getting a patch test. So you can go into your allergist will probably give this to you. Your dermatologist will just be like, I don't know, here, have some steroid cream. But your allergist will give you a patch test and they just put a bunch of substances on your back and you wear them for 3 days. You're not allowed to take a shower. It's pretty miserable. But then they look at what caused you to have a reaction.
Okay.
And they'll give you like 80 to 100 different substances to try all at once. There's thousands and thousands of different chemicals. So they're going to give you the most common allergens. And a lot of them are dispersed dyes, which are used on synthetics,
Okay.
dye intermediates, formaldehyde, nickel. There's a lot of things that are used on fashion that come in that panel.
Okay, that's great to know because that was one of the questions that I was thinking about is like, so how can we start to like unravel this? I really like the idea of the textile elimination.
Mhm.
That may and gen I mean again because it can be anywhere from allergy symptoms to rashes, like some sort of inflammatory response, and it's not going to be the same for everybody, right? But giving it that break, I mean, generally, how long would you suggest as far as the elimination for?
I don't know because like clearly there's been no research on
Yes, right.
this. I will say that I'm putting out an article soon on EcoCult Substack, and it includes an interview with a woman who um, she's an acquaintance of mine, and she is really sweet. She bought the book just because she was like, "That's cool. Like I care about sustainability and Alden's cool, and I'm gonna buy the book to support her." And then she read the book and she suffered her entire adult life from these really unsightly red bumps all over her back. And she would go to
Mm.
the dermatologist, and the dermatologist prescribed Accutane and steroid cream and all of this stuff. She read my book while she was planning her wedding. And she said, I asked, and she said she stopped wearing synthetics. So she was like, oh, maybe this is what's causing it. And she said it cleared up immediately. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, within a few days. She was like, I don't like it was immediate that it cleared up. So you might like I would say maybe even a week might
Week.
be enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, especially for like maybe the topical like things, maybe for more subset chronic autoimmune that maybe needs a little bit
Yeah,
more of a
more time.
throw to like draw those connections, but well worth investigation.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
in that can be a place of little overwhelm sometimes for
Yeah.
patients, for people. Um, and if not, you're not necessarily struggling with a lot of these chronic symptoms, but really are more concerned about like what are you putting on your skin
Yeah.
and where are good places to start and focus and remove, like what would you suggest, like if somebody's like I've never looked at this, I have
Mhm.
no idea, but are going to start looking at their labels and
Mhm.
maybe start making some baby steps, changes, what would you suggest?
Yeah, well, I have to couch this by saying the fashion industry is not required to share much information about what is in their clothing, right?
Right.
So you could buy something that says 100% cotton, and it actually might be 4% other stuff. Because anything that's less than 5% of the weight of the garment doesn't really have to be listed.
It's a really
Uh,
good point.
yeah. So it could have dyes, it could have finishes, it could have processing, intermediate chemicals, it could have contamination, it could have pesticides, fungicides just from the storage and shipping of all this stuff. So,
Hmm.
um, I have a list of things that people can do, and no one of these things is going to be the silver bullet because, there's no listing of ingredients that
Right.
will help you know for sure that you're avoiding something. And so the first thing I tell people is try to avoid synthetics when possible, especially synthetics that are being worn right next to your skin.
Yeah.
They will have these known sensitizing dyes used on
Mm.
them. I always compare it to, if you imagine trying to dye a plastic water bottle.
Ah,
Yes. So
hard.
that plastic that water bottle is made out of is PET. It is actually the
Mm.
exact same thing as polyester.
Ah,
So if you imagine trying to dye that water bottle, you can imagine how gnarly those dyes are. And so if you avoid synthetics, you're avoiding that. You're also avoiding it. They're just more likely to have other known hazardous chemicals on them. And so I recommend, especially for your underwear, your workout clothing, like tight yoga leggings, um, anything that's just like your socks for sure. Anything that you could sweat in that's on your intimate parts that's just next to your body all the time, pajamas, sheets, things like that. Try to get synthetics out. Of course,
Right.
I still have, raincoat shells and things like that.
Right.
Um, so start there. I would also say that people should never buy ultra fast fashion. And when I say ultra fast fashion, I mean Shein, Temu, brands on Amazon. Any brand that you've never heard of that's advertising you on social media and seems a little bit sketchy and takes
And
two
cheap.
weeks to get to you.
Yes.
Yeah, those things are high risk because
Mm.
those companies, nobody's checking that stuff as it comes straight from the factory to you. Is usually factories that brands like H&M wouldn't even work with because
Mm.
they're so sloppy and unethical. And so they're trying to get around all of those barriers to just ship straight to you by advertising to you on social media. Nobody's checking those things. They're not subject to federal regulations or even strong state regulations like California's Prop 65, which I can explain.
Mhm.
So those are very risky. They're super cheap for a reason. There's a price below which you cannot ensure chemical safety because if you're leaning on your suppliers to go that cheap, that means that they're getting their chemicals from whoever is the cheapest. So it could be the guy down the road who's using pharmaceutical waste
Right.
or mining like chemicals that could be contaminated. So we don't want to do that. The other thing I would tell people is try to avoid performance and promises. So
Yes.
any fabric that has a trademark name or promises to do something that natural fabrics can't usually do, or even synthetic fabrics can't usually do, I would stay away from that. So if it's wrinkle-free, stain resistant, water resistant, easy care, anti-odor, all of these different things, I those are usually achieved with chemical finishes, and
Hmm.
you'd be better off just first of all, it's also a way for brands to price their products as higher because at this point you can't really charge more for just cotton. But if you trademark it, you make it a trade secret by adding chemicals or synthetics, then you can sell it for more. Like you think about like Gore-Tex, for example,
Right.
who's currently being sued for greenwashing by promising that their PFAS containing products are actually environmentally friendly. Like those are advertised and it's a way for these outdoor brands to be like, we have Gore-Tex, therefore you should pay $250 for our outdoor jacket.
Yeah. That was a big revelation to me of like, oh,
Hmm.
makes sense, right? Like how are they making this performance? I mean, it has to be chemical based, right? In
Right.
most cases, not maybe everything, but like,
If it's not a chemical finish, it's a synthetic blend.
yeah.
There are a few sort of eco-friendly solutions, but if it's an eco-friendly solution, then they'll advertise that. They'll be like, "Oh, we're using peppermint oil," or, we're using this or that. Nano silver is also a no-go for me. I
Yeah.
know somebody was just saying the other day, well, I like my Capeline because, it's anti-odor because it has a silver finish on it. And I was like,
Mm,
really want to be wearing an antibacterial material next to your skin all the time? I was like, why not just buy merino wool? It's so nice.
right.
Yeah.
And that breaks down too, and there's a lot more question about like breathing that in, those.
Breathing it in or
Mhm.
ingesting it.
Mm,
We know it's not good for aquatic life.
right.
Probably not good for our microbiome if you think about it. So, I would avoid that as well.
Yeah. Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Since meeting you, I met you last fall at your book signing and reading your book, like I have read so many labels on clothing now. Like that's like the big thing that I do. First and foremost, like what is in it, right? And
Yes.
so when people start maybe more looking at the labels and what is in it, what are some real red flags, common terms for like plastics,
Yeah.
synthetics that people can look at and be like, no. And or a follow-up question with that is because a lot of it, what I've noticed is like it's rare to find a lot of options now without any, right? There's usually
Yeah.
like even in the better options, maybe there's a smaller percentage. Like if somebody was again trying to take that step
Yeah.
and minimize their clothing having synthetics, is
Yeah.
there an okay amount?
Of
Synthetics like
Oh,
that.
synthetics, yeah. So, I would say that it's going to be really hard for people to find anything stretchy with zero
Yeah.
synthetics. So, sports bras are a hard thing. I have shared some on EcoCult. We have ecocult.com. We still have a lot of shopping guides where people can look for things. But like sports bras, for example, are a really hard thing. Like even the natural ones that have up to 8% or 10%
Yes.
spandex, they tend that te amount tends to be okay for people with sensitive skin.
Okay.
Um, but you're just going to get less performance out of it. So, our ladies that have a larger bust, like it's a little bit harder for them to avoid synthetics in that way. If you're going to get organic cotton yoga leggings, you're going to have at least 5 or 6% spandex, lycra, things like that in
Yeah.
there. Again, it that tends to be okay, and it's better than a polyester spandex blend for sure.
Right.
Some other things that I would say to avoid. So besides, the branded trademarked stuff, right? If you, with some exceptions, if you don't recognize it or it's like Lululemon has a bunch of like trademark fabrics, it's just all synthetics.
Mm.
I would avoid anything that says durable water repellent because that's usually a PFAS thing, right? So
Mm.
durable water repellent, that means they put something on there to make the water come off. Unless they say this is completely fluorinated chemistry free or PFAS free, then that's a good indication that there is PFAS on there. And PFAS, for those who don't know, is it's a highly carcinogenic and reproductive toxic chemical that it's called forever chemicals, or
Yes.
they're called forever chemicals. There's a class of around 12,000 of them because they just never break down or go away. So there
Right.
are other reproductive toxic chemicals like BPA and phthalates, and we get exposed to them. And if we stop our exposure, we pee them out. They like leave
Hmm.
our body. They break down. PFAS doesn't. It just sticks around in our
Accumulates.
fat. Yeah, in our fat, in our blood. Most Americans have it in their blood now.
Hmm.
Um, there are animals in the Arctic that have it. Um, and we just don't want more of that. We don't want to bring more of that into our home. It's the reason why everybody's throwing away their nonstick pans.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Right. 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 And when I think about that, I think of like rain gear. Like where are we finding a lot of the high level of the PFAS in more performance? I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
performance. So rain gear, ski gear, snowboarding
Yeah.
gear, um, stain-proof stuff.
Hmm.
So it's been found in children's uniforms and clothing because parents love the stain resistance, but that means it has PFAS in it.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So that's great. That's really great to know. Places to look. And are there companies that are moving away from that? Are there brands that are trying? I feel like it's pretty seems predominant.
Yeah. So there's a few things that have happened here. There are brands that have moved away from it. So Patagonia, it took them a while, but they did finally move away from it. There's a few others that have moved away from it, mostly European brands. If you want to be really like there's some European brands. EcoCult does have a PFAS-free guide to outdoor gear and snow gear if
Great.
people are interested. The other thing that has happened recently is that California, New York, Vermont, and Minnesota have all banned PFAS in apparel and cosmetics, as well as I think maybe a few other categories.
Yeah,
And
I think
so
it came into effect in Minnesota this year, 2025. I think.
yeah, same
Hmm.
with New York and California. So, um, with New York and California, what's so great about that is that there's two such huge markets that no brand is gonna make stuff with PFAS to sell in the rest of the United States and keep it out of New York and California. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So these two states are protecting the rest of the United States. And That's great, but it's only for everyday apparel. So you can be
Okay.
sure that your t-shirt's not going to have it, but when it comes to things like, outdoor gear, performance gear, I want to say both of them, or at least one of them, have pushed that to 2028. So it'll be a
Okay.
few more years on that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, but really good to know. And as a perfect, like some of us, like I love being outside and I have over the years relied on some of this performance ability
Mhm.
of clothing to go out in the rain or go, out sledding or skiing. Um, and so I think, I mean, I'm looking to move away from, some of the clothing as this becomes more mainstream. But is it helpful to have barriers like for people, like wearing natural clothing underneath our performance outdoor
Yeah,
gear?
it definitely is.
Yeah.
I would say that if you're concerned about this, it does help you, but the thing is that um when you're bringing it into your home, it's coming off into your home. There's a lot
Uh,
of good evidence that like it'll come off into your home. If you're touching it, right, it'll come off onto your hands.
yep.
Um, and they've shown also that ski resorts and base camp at Mount Everest are just like the it's saturated with PFAS because
Oh,
so many people are wearing these things. So
right.
it's both it's an individual problem and a home problem for sure, but it's also a really big problem for
Systemic.
the environment.
Right.
So I know this gear is really expensive, so if you've just bought this gear, you're probably not going to want to replace it for yourself. I mean, kids grow so fast that um, as you're buying this gear, you can start to swap things out for brands that are have gone completely PFAS free.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and I personally tried to lend. I mean, a lot of our clothing has come from secondhand, but again, still keeping this in mind because again, if it's something's well used, again, going into that environmental
Yeah.
exposure in our homes and in the environment. I mean, that's worse, right? In
Yeah, I
some,
mean, I would say if it's used, it's probably lost a lot of it. But I would just when you're not wearing this stuff, I would package it up. I would put it in a bin
great
or a
idea.
bag, just to keep it from going all over the place.
Yeah, and having good, I mean, we have a lot. We live in a city that has a air problem issue, and so I have like four high-end air purifiers around, which I'm hoping that is somewhat helpful too.
I actually don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know how air purifiers do with this. So it's definitely more of a house dust thing, so a
yep,
touching thing. If
hmm
you have children that are crawling around, if you have pets that are walking around and then licking their paws,
yep,
that is the
where
bigger
it
issue. So
accumulates
you want to, I mean, you should do this anyway, but like one of the biggest things you can do for house dust is vacuum wipe dust,
with
vacuum wipe dust.
wet. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, 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 and yeah, be better about house cleaning. It's good.
Sorry, not to pile more on you.
It's a good reminder. I've been more motivated about that versus in the actual like accumulation of dust. So
Yeah, right.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But that is a really good reminder. But yeah,
Nothing like
hopefully
hazardous chemicals to motivate a mom.
I know, right? Exactly. Exactly. So for you and learning all of this, how has this evolved your own personal like textiles and clothing? Has it impacted you, would
That
you
is
say?
a good question. As I was reporting this book, I felt like I was outside the problem. I have great
Ah,
health,
yeah.
and I think it was a benefit because when you have these health issues and these reactions, you go to your doctor and your doctor says, "Well, I know you say you're having this experience, but I can't find any proof." It can be really, really crazy making. And so it was good for me to sort of be outside of this issue so I could pull all the threads together and say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? The evidence is really overwhelming from an objective standpoint. However, I discovered as I was going through this process, so I was reporting this book in the middle of the pandemic, and a few years before, I had noticed that if I was on a plane for 8 hours, back when like everybody was wearing yoga leggings to
Oh,
travel,
yeah.
I would start to get a little bit itchy.
Mm,
And my whole life I had had acne on the backside of my legs
mm,
and my butt, and I just thought it was just a thing,
right.
right? It was just a thing that I have a skin issue. I'd been to the doctor a few times as a kid, but it was just like nothing was really working on it. And so anyway, so I started switching to organic cotton leggings just for the comfort. I,
Yeah.
I listened to my body, right? But it was sort of a selfish thing. It was like, oh, I just don't want to feel itchy, so I'm just going to start wearing co organic cotton, and a sustainability thing a little bit. And then the pandemic happened, and I was living in sweatpants and pajamas every day. And as the pandemic started to ease back up and I was going out again, I remember two instances where, and these are minor in the pantheon of reactions to clothing, right? Because clothing can have carcinogens and heavy metals and really ha hazardous pesticides and biocides and all these things. But I did notice two instances. One where I put on an old pair of synthetic bicycle shorts to go to hot yoga.
Ah.
And the next time I put on black nylon tights and I wore them, I like drove down to a speaking engagement that was, 2.5 hours away. And then I kept driving down to New York for another 2.5 hours. I was sitting in these synthetic tights for a total of 5 hours plus speaking engagement time. And both days I woke up the next day and I had these huge pimples on my butt.
Ah.
And I was like,
Yes.
oh, oh my God. I had accidentally gone on an elimination diet and started reintroducing black synthetic things
Hmm.
into my wardrobe and realized, oh, this is why.
Right.
This is why. And so I no longer feel like, oh, well, this doesn't affect me. Like I'm healthy, you know?
Yeah.
I really think that there are millions and millions of people walking around one either accepting that this is just the way their health is
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons, right? Not just clothing, the food we eat, the home
Yes.
we live in, all these different things. Or they're trying to solve the problem and they're doing everything. They've cut dairy out, they cut sugar out, they're using the creams, they don't use fragrance detergent, la 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 la. And there's this one thing that I'm trying to share with people, not to scare people, because like a lot of times people get out of this like, oh, well, everything is terrible. Not untrue, but also if you're doing all these other things and it's not working, here's another tool in your toolkit to improve your health.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I really got excited about that for my own patients because that is we need a toolbox, right? And we
Right.
need things to explore. And I have had several patients where this information, your book to die for, has been life-changing, very, very helpful for them.
Oh, amazing. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I always love hearing
Yeah,
those stories.
yeah. So I had a patient, long-term patient, a lot of allergy, histamine, um, autoimmune, and she lived in spandex. Lived like
Yeah.
athlete. She was an athlete.
I bet she
Uh,
looks super cute in her spandex.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
She told me she sleeps in her spandex,
Oh
like
my
in
God,
her athletic.
really?
Yes, in her athletic clothes. But since COVID, there's been a lot more challenges for her health wise,
Mhm.
and this is not an we've explored so many. She's worked with a lot of functional medicine doctors
Yeah.
and has made a lot of progress in her health, but there's just something there. There's just something that hasn't been
Yeah.
explored. And this area, as I'm hopeful, it's still we're still testing out, but I think this is a piece of the puzzle that was missing, right, for
Amazing.
her.
Amazing.
So that through my friend networks with my kids' schools, mothers who their children like refuse to wear clothes, right? And
Yeah.
having some answers of underlying why and
Yeah.
why they were having to make their own clothes at home. And that was the only solution that was working when they were
Yeah.
using 100% natural clothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so it's really when I look around, like now that this is unveiled to me, I just look around in our society and I just see most people walking around in synthetics.
And living in synthetics, right?
Yes.
Synthetic carpeting, synthetic curtains, synthetic sheets, synthetic everything. I mean,
Right.
once you see it, you can't you can't unsee it.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and as you mentioned a few times, I've been using your website too as like a guide, and I really personally need to take steps to make change. I could get easily overwhelmed to put my head in the sand, do nothing. So slowly making changes and adjusting brands when we need to get rid of something, especially with kids, they
Yeah.
outgrow things and then you need something new. I found this a super helpful place to go and feel good about and
Yeah.
trust,
Yeah. And
good
I'd
things.
love to add to that as well because again, EcoCult has all of these like if people want to search online for EcoCult and cheap mall brands, you could just go to the mall and get things there. Or if they want to look for the super, super safe brands or children's products in general, we have all that. But there's a few ones that I tend to recommend, especially for families on a budget,
Mm,
which is Target in-house brands. They have a
great.
very strong chemical management program. Again, layer that with trying to buy natural fibers whenever possible, of course.
Yes.
Uh, H&M, they've had a strong chemical management program for longer than almost any other brand.
That was surprising to me.
Yeah, I think H&M, I spend way too much time defending H&M. I feel like they were made the poster child of fast fashion and they're so Swedish. They're always like, "Okay, we'll try to fix it." And then they like keep trying to fix it and people just aren't picking up on that and they're just picking up on there's so many brands that just consciously hide from this issue.
Yeah.
And those are brands where you might recognize them and they've sort of been bought by and financialized by like hedge funds and private equity and they're just licensed brands so they actually do not care. So one of them that just went out of a umbrella brand that just went out of business that had no chemical management program whatsoever is like Billabong
Mm,
and Roxy and like that whole sort of surf lifestyle stuff. But there's others that I have not seen them do any work on this. So just because you recognize the brand doesn't necessarily mean it is a really good reputation. Some
right.
other brands that you can find easily that are affordable, Vans has a strong program, Levi's has a strong program, and you can get like almost 100% cotton jeans and things like that
Yeah.
from them.
Right.
Um, there are others that you can find, but those are the ones that come to mind most quickly. Old Navy and Gap, they have strong chemical management programs. So all of those are pretty good if you're a family and you do want to buy new. And then if you can also buy secondhand, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's better, right? Because
Right.
some people use so much Tide and Gain. And it is a process to strip those phthalate containing forever
Yes.
scented products off, but it is a good way to get more affordable clothing that's natural and from some more of those reputable sustainable brands.
Yeah, that's right. I really appreciate that because I mean, makes this for a lot of people like attainable,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
That
and Hannah Anderson too.
Oh,
They
okay.
make
Yeah.
the really cute pajamas.
Yes,
I
yes.
recommend them.
Yeah, my daughter had a pair of those for Christmas. It was so cute. Like
Yeah. Well,
I
there you
love it.
go.
Yeah. But you're right. Like I buy mostly secondhand and some I just put right back maybe 100% cotton, but it seems
Yeah.
like a good option, but like a smell of detergent. And
Oh.
I've had to wash things like 8 to 10 times before I feel like that strong odor is
Yeah.
improved. I'm like,
Can I give you a tip on that?
yeah,
Please?
please.
So the thing that we had a contributor who was a mom, is a mom, and also has sensitive skin, and so does her children. And she tried out a few different, we call them laundry stripping, but that's different. Just ways to get the scent off of clothing. And the thing she found that worked best was a combination of vinegar and bottom shelf vodka.
Oh,
So like give it a good soak and that stuff will strip things out. The other thing is that it's hard to find, but you can order it online. Febreze comes in the unscented version. The only reason why Febreze is scented is because people have this psychological thing where if it doesn't smell like if it doesn't smell like clean, this is all in quotes,
Right.
they don't think it's working. So Febreze started adding in scent because that made it sell better. But you can find scent-free Febreze. It still has the encapsulation technology without like the ridiculousness that
And
surrounds it.
it's okay. The
I'm
scent
pretty
free.
sure it's okay. Yeah.
Okay. I did not know that. That's
Yeah. But
awesome.
usually I just use
Yeah.
vodka
In
and
cold
vinegar
or
will do
warm
me.
water, do you soak? Does it matter?
No, I don't
Yeah.
think it does. Yeah.
How long do you?
I mean, sometimes you can
Depends.
just pour the vinegar right in your wash.
Oh, and
Yeah.
not the vodka? No.
The vodka, I mean, you could try that too. You could soak it. You could spray, like I will, if I want to deodorize my furniture and my curtains, I'll just do a water vodka spray and just spray everything down.
I love this.
Yeah. And
I'm
it's
totally
not
gonna
going
do
to
it.
smell like vodka. The vodka will evaporate and pull the odor out with it.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I really appreciate you sharing that. I had no idea the benefits
Yeah,
of
that's an old
vodka.
trick that like costume
Ah,
secondhand vintage resellers and costume people use.
cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So my last question for you in
Yeah.
context to all of this, are there, like food certifications or I work a lot with supplements and that's another unregulated industry
Mhm.
and some people will maybe, and I too recommend relying on certain types of certifications that I think are better gold standard to verify what is the claims on the label is true.
Yeah.
And I know it's kind of this gray area in textiles. Are there certifications that you like better than others, or yeah,
Yes,
what's going on
absolutely.
with that? Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say is that GOTS organic certification is not an assurance of non-toxicity.
Mm,
It's really more about how things were grown in the field, but by the time cotton gets from the field to you, it doesn't really matter if they use pesticides or not. Also, it's an easily gameable system. It doesn't mean they used organic plant-based dyes. It just means that like the factory or the dye house sort of submitted some paperwork saying this is what we're going to use. So that's unfortunately not a good assurance. There are non-toxic brands that use that, but they layer on other protections, right? So they're like they only source from LA factories, or they are also certified by other certifications, or they source completely in the United States, or they're part of a couple of programs. Like they do more than just that.
yep.
So I will say the two best labels are OEKO-TEX. So OEKO-TEX is spelled a little bit weird because it's German, so it's
Yeah.
OEKO-TEX
Okay.
and Blue Sign. So OEKO-TEX, the way that one works is they have a certification that a factory can be certified, a fabric can be certified, or a final product can be certified. And that just means that if the final product is certified, which is the best, it means that it's moved through a series of certified suppliers to get to you. And also that product, not that product exactly that you're buying, but like that type of product out
Hmm.
of that factory has been tested at least once a year to certify that it's free or has levels below a certain threshold of certain hazardous chemicals.
Great. And
Blue
will it
Sign,
say that on there? Will it say like finish certified or factory
so
certified?
yeah, I
Mhm.
wish it were a little bit more clear.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at a brand, there's very precise language that they use. So they will say, uh, let's say you're looking at a website and you see the OEKO-TEX thing. They might say, we source OEKO-TEX certified silk.
Mm,
Or they on the product page, so that'll be like on the sustainability page. On the product page, if the product is certified, they will say this product is OEKO-TEX certified.
okay.
Yeah. The other one to look for is Blue Sign. So Blue Sign means that, and it's a little bit less consumer facing, but it'll say on the sustainability page or other pages on a website of a brand. And that basically means that the suppliers and the brand have worked with Blue Sign to ensure that they're using certified safe chemicals and dyes and that they're using them in a safe way.
Great. That's great. Awesome. Yeah. And I've seen those now. I've been starting to like pay attention and
Yeah.
I've seen all of those ones that you had mentioned, even on places like Amazon. I don't know if that's the best place to be buying stuff, but
Yeah, I
um
mean, not everything on Amazon is bad. There are brands that are good that sell on Amazon. When
yeah.
I say don't buy, like when they it's like all capital letters, gibberish, or it's
Yeah.
like
Not
smushed together
spelled right.
words.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, this isn't a real brand. Those
Yes.
brands, air quotes, are ones that you want to avoid.
Not to go. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Well, this has been really enlightening. I again really appreciate your time and I would love how can people connect with you? Like what are best ways for people to continue to learn from you and what have you been working on of recent?
Yeah, so the best way to follow my work now is to follow EcoCult on Substack.
Great.
So there's still a lot of resources that are free on ecocult.com, but they are not being updated. So if you
Okay.
want the latest, and also I have a community there where I'll just be like, what underwear are people wearing? And people will talk about their favorite brands and things like that. So there's a little community over there where you can share with other people.
Awesome. Great. Well, again, I appreciate all you're doing and definitely will continue to follow your work. I hope
Thank you so much for
yeah.
having me, Leah. It was so nice to speak with you again and see you again.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Better with Age podcast. I'm Leah Wetzel, and it was such an honor today to be able to interview Alden Wicker. I highly recommend you check out her book. It's called To Die For: How Toxic Fashion is Making Us Sick. She's a great investigative journalist. And please check out her websites, aldenwicker.com and on EcoCult Substack. She's transitioned a lot of her work onto substack.com and is posting regularly there. You can also check her out on Instagram as well. And if you enjoyed today's show of what we featured on how we want to focus on healthy textiles or all the other experts that we bring on to share with you, please like and subscribe for the Better with Age podcast. It really helps us grow our programming. And if you're wanting to learn more about our Better with Age program, it is a great program that Galen and I put together to help people with healthy aging, to live out the years of your life the way you really want to do. So this program incorporates in ways for you to improve your strength and bone density, heart and brain health, inflammation and gut health, and really gives you the strategies that you need to live the life you want to live. Check out betterwithage.online for more information about the program and connect with us. Galen and I do free 15-minute calls with people to see if the program is right for you. Well, thank you for listening to the end of the program, and I really hope that you have a great rest of your day. Bye.